My name is Chloe, and I was 23 years old when I walked into a courtroom wearing a coffee-stained apron and non-slip shoes. The bailiff looked at my uniform, then at my mother's designer suit, then back at my uniform. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I already knew what everyone was thinking. I was thinking it too. But my grandfather taught me something when I was 12 years old. He sat me down in his study, the one with the leather chairs that smelled like cedar and old paper, and he said, "Chloe, the world is going to underestimate you every single day. Let them. Just don't ever underestimate yourself." That was 14 years before the courtroom. 14 years before my mother looked at me from across the room, adjusted her pearl necklace, and whispered something to my sister that made them both smile. 14 years before a judge in black robes leaned forward and said, "A waitress handling millions? Really?" 14 years before I reached into my bag and pulled out something that made the entire room forget how to breathe. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the night everything changed. I was 9 years old. My grandfather, Arthur, was 73. He had built a logistics company from nothing, started with one truck and a handshake, ended with a fleet across 3 states. He wasn't flashy about money. He drove a 10-year-old sedan and wore the same brown jacket every winter. But he was the richest person I ever knew, and not because of the bank account. My mother didn't understand that about him. She understood the inheritance. She understood the estate. She understood what $11 million could buy: a new house, a new car, a new life where she didn't have to pretend to like people she hated. But she never understood him. And on the night I was 9, my mother made a choice that I didn't fully understand until I was old enough to realize that some people love status more than they love their own children. It was December 18th, my grandfather's birthday dinner. He had rented a private room at a restaurant downtown, nothing extravagant, just a long table with white tablecloths and candles that flickered against the winter dark outside. I remember what I wore. A red dress my grandmother bought before she died. It was too big in the shoulders, but I loved it because it smelled like her perfume, even years later. My mother wore black. She always wore black to family dinners, like she was mourning something no one else could see. The dinner started fine. Polite. Surface level. My grandfather asked about school. I told him about my science project, a volcano that actually worked, baking soda and vinegar, the whole thing. He laughed and said I got my brains from him, and my mother's fork made a sound against her plate. Not loud, just sharp, just enough. After dinner, my grandfather asked to speak with my mother alone. They stepped into the hallway outside the private room. I could see them through the crack in the door, his hand on her arm, her face tightening like she was already bored. I didn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "Eleanor, I'm not giving you access to the trust fund early. It's for Chloe's education." That's what your mother wanted. She's 9, Dad. She doesn't need a trust fund. I need a new roof on the house. Then fix the roof with your own money. You don't understand what it's like. I understand perfectly. You want the money for yourself. And that's exactly why I'm protecting it from you. Silence. Then my mother's voice, lower now, almost pleasant. The kind of pleasant that lives right next to cruelty. "You've always loved her more than me. Isn't that funny? My own father loves his granddaughter more than his daughter." My grandfather didn't respond to that. He just looked at her for a long moment, and then he said something I didn't understand until I was much older. "Someone has to." He walked back into the restaurant. My mother stayed in the hallway for another minute. When she came back in, her smile was perfect. Her eyes were not. That was the first night I remember being aware that my mother didn't like me. Not as a person. Not as her daughter. She saw me as an obstacle. I didn't see my grandfather as often after that night. My mother found reasons to keep me away: soccer practice, tutoring, a cold that lasted 2 weeks and then 3. Looking back, I think she was trying to weaken my bond with him. Make him miss me. Make him desperate to please her so he could see me again. But my grandfather wasn't stupid. He called me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. He sent letters, actual handwritten letters, with stamps and everything. He showed up at my school plays, sitting in the back row so my mother wouldn't see him, and he'd leave roses for me at the front office with a note that said, "Bravo." When I was 14, my mother remarried. A man named Richard who sold medical equipment and laughed too loud at his own jokes. He had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, perfect blonde girls who played tennis and got good grades and never once showed up to dinner with baking soda under their fingernails. Within 6 months, my mother stopped calling me Chloe. She called me the waitress. It started as a joke. At least, I think it started that way. We were at a restaurant, a different restaurant, one my mother chose because it was expensive and she wanted Richard to see that she came from money, even if she didn't have any of her own. I spilled my water. Just water. The glass tipped, water spread across the white tablecloth, and my mother laughed and said, "Well, you'd make a terrible waitress, wouldn't you?" Everyone laughed. Even I laughed because I was 14 and I still wanted her to love me. But the joke didn't go away. It followed me home. It followed me through high school, through college applications, through the year I decided to take a gap year and work at a diner because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life yet. The waitress, my mother would say to her friends. My daughter, the waitress. Can you believe it? Arthur's granddaughter. She said it like it was tragic. She said it like I had failed her just by existing. My grandfather heard about it. I don't know who told him. Maybe he just knew. He showed up at the diner one Tuesday afternoon, ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie, and watched me work for an hour. I was embarrassed at first. The uniform. The smell of grease. The way my hair never stayed in its ponytail. But when my shift ended, he was still sitting there. Pie half-eaten. Coffee cold. He looked at me and said, "You're good at this." "It's just waiting tables, Grandpa." "No," he said. "It's not. You're kind to people who are rude to you. You remember orders without writing them down. You make old men feel seen and tired women feel cared for. That's not nothing, Chloe. That's everything." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I'm not going to be around forever," he said. "And when I'm gone, your mother is going to come after you. She's going to say terrible things. She's going to try to take what's yours. But I need you to remember something." He slid the envelope across the table. "You're not just a waitress. You're my granddaughter. And I have always been proud of you." I opened the envelope later that night, alone in my apartment. It was a key. Just a small brass key, taped to a piece of paper with an address written in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. "Safety deposit box. First National Bank. Don't open it until you have to. You'll know when." 6 months later, my grandfather died. Heart attack. Sudden. Peaceful, they said. He was in his garden, pruning roses, and then he wasn't. I didn't hear about it from my mother. I heard about it from a nurse at the hospital because my father, my real father, who left when I was 3, happened to be working security that night and recognized my name on the admission form. He called me at 2 a.m. "Chloe, your grandfather. You need to get here." By the time I arrived, my mother was already there. Standing in the hallway, holding a clipboard, talking to a lawyer in a gray suit. She looked up when I walked in. Looked at my uniform. I had come straight from a double shift, still wearing my apron, still smelling like coffee grounds and dish soap. And she smiled. Not a happy smile. A satisfied one. "Oh good," she said. "The waitress is here." The lawyer coughed. My mother tilted her head, studying me like I was a stain she couldn't quite remove. "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. I've already spoken to the estate attorney. The will is clear." I didn't say anything. I just stood there in my dirty uniform, holding my grandfather's key in my pocket, and I waited. Because my grandfather had taught me something important. He taught me that the best time to speak is usually not right now. The funeral was 3 days later. Gray sky. Cold rain. The kind of weather that makes everyone look smaller than they really are. My mother gave a eulogy. She cried real tears, I think, and talked about what a generous man my grandfather was, what a loving father, what a pillar of the community. My sister stood next to her, holding her hand. Richard's daughter stood behind them, looking appropriately sad in black dresses that probably cost more than my rent. I sat in the back row alone. No one saved me a seat. No one asked if I wanted to speak. After the funeral, There was a reception at my mother's house. She didn't invite me. I found out from a cousin who texted, "Are you coming? There's so much food." I didn't go. I went to First National Bank instead. The safety deposit box was in the vault, all the way in the back, past the heavy door and the security cameras and the tellers who looked at me like I didn't belong there. But the key worked. The box opened. And inside, I found 3 things: a letter, a flash drive, and a copy of my grandfather's will dated 3 months before he died, signed by him and 2 witnesses I didn't recognize. I read the letter first. It was short, just 1 page. "Chloe, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And your mother has probably already tried to cut you out of everything. Don't worry. I planned for that." The flash drive has a video of me signing this will. The witnesses are Judge Morrison and attorney Patricia Holloway, both still alive, both willing to testify. Your mother is going to fight you. She's going to lie. She's going to make you feel small and unworthy and like you don't belong in that courtroom. But you do belong there. You belong everywhere you decide to belong. Now go take what's yours. Love, Grandpa. P.S. You're not just a waitress. You're the strongest person I ever knew. Don't let her tell you otherwise. I sat in the bank lobby for a long time after that. The security guard asked if I was okay. I said yes. I was not okay, but I was something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet. I was ready. The lawsuit came 6 months later. My mother and sister filed jointly, claiming the new will was invalid. They said my grandfather was confused, manipulated, not in his right mind. They said I had pressured him, taken advantage of his age, isolated him from the family. They said a lot of things. None of them were true. But truth doesn't matter in a courtroom. Evidence does. And my mother was counting on one thing, that I wouldn't have any. "She's a waitress," my mother told the mediator during our first settlement meeting. "She can't even manage her own life. How could my father possibly leave everything to her?" My sister nodded along. The mediator, a tired woman in a beige blazer, looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Miss Clark," she said, "do you have any documentation supporting your claim?" I thought about the safety deposit box. I thought about the flash drive. I thought about Judge Morrison and attorney Holloway, both in their 80s, both still alive. And I said, yes, I do. But I didn't show them. Not yet. Because my grandfather also taught me something else. He taught me that revenge isn't about winning fast. It's about winning completely. And the only way to win completely against someone like my mother is to let her hang herself in public. So I waited. I let her laugh. I let the mediator doubt me. I let my sister post passive-aggressive Facebook statuses about family loyalty and blood being thicker than water. I showed up to every hearing in my uniform, with my apron, with coffee stains on my sleeve. I let them all think I was nothing, because I knew what was coming. And the day it finally came, the day the judge looked at me and said, "A waitress handling millions? Really?" I stood up. I reached into my bag, and I pulled out the flash drive. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking, "I'm not just a waitress. And I have something you need to see." The courtroom went silent. My mother stopped smiling. And the judge said, "Proceed." I plugged the flash drive into the courtroom's media station. The technician, a young man with tired eyes, gave me a questioning look. I nodded. He pressed play. The screen mounted on the wall flickered to life. And there was my grandfather, sitting in his study, the leather chair, the cedar shelves behind him, the afternoon light coming through the window, catching the dust motes floating in the air. He looked older than I remembered, frielier, but his eyes were the same, sharp, aware, fully present. "My name is Arthur Clark," he said into the camera. Asterisk, today is August 14th. I am 79 years old. I am of sound mind, no medications that affect my judgment, and I am recording this of my own free will. Asterisk. He paused, adjusted his glasses. I am aware that after my death, my daughter Eleanor may attempt to challenge my last will and testament. I am aware she may claim I was confused, manipulated, or not in my right mind. He looked directly into the camera, directly at the courtroom, directly at my mother. That is a lie. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that suffocates. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't have to. I could feel her presence across the room, the way her breathing had changed, the way her body had gone rigid. My grandfather continued. I am leaving my estate, approximately $11 million in assets, plus the house in Vermont and the lake property, solely to my granddaughter, Chloe Marie Clark. I am leaving nothing to my daughter Eleanor or my granddaughter Jessica. This is not a decision I made lightly. This is a decision I made because I have watched Eleanor manipulate, belittle, and emotionally abandon her own child for years. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk, held it close to the camera. I have attached to this video a letter from Dr. Helen Ramirez, my primary care physician, confirming my mental capacity. I have also attached a signed affidavit from Judge Morrison, who witnessed my signature. And I have attached bank records showing that over the past 10 years, Eleanor has asked me for money 47 times, each time for expenses that did not exist. He set the paper down. The last time she asked was for a medical emergency. I called the hospital. There was no emergency. She wanted a down payment on a vacation home. My mother's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, this video is. Sit down, the judge said. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. My mother's lawyer sat. My grandfather's voice filled the room again. Chloe, if you're watching this, I'm sorry you had to fight. I'm sorry your mother couldn't love you the way you deserved. But I need you to know something. His voice cracked. Just a little. You were never the problem. You were always the solution. You were the best thing that happened to this family, and Eleanor was too blind to see it. So take the money. Finish school. Buy a house. Adopt a dog. Do whatever makes you happy. And don't look back. He smiled. I love you, kiddo. More than you'll ever know. The video ended. The screen went black. For 5 full seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the judge turned to my mother. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, using her married name, the one she'd taken from Richard, the one that erased my father entirely. Do you still wish to contest this will? My mother's face was pale. Not ashamed, that would have required self-awareness. She was pale because she had been caught. Because the narrative she'd spent 6 months building had just collapsed in front of 50 people. That video is fabricated, she whispered. The technician spoke up. Your Honor, the file metadata is clean. No edits. No manipulation. Date stamp matches August 14th. My mother's lawyer leaned over and whispered something in her ear. I couldn't hear what, but I watched her jaw tighten. Watched her hands grip the edge of the table. Then she stood up. This isn't over, she said. Not to the judge. To me. She grabbed her purse. Her designer heels clicked against the floor as she walked toward the double doors. My sister followed, pale, silent, not looking at anyone. At the door, my mother stopped. Turned back. You think you've won something, she said. But you're still just a waitress. Money doesn't change what you are. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Whitmore, if you leave this courtroom before I've dismissed you, I will hold you in contempt. She left anyway. The doors swung shut behind her. And the courtroom, the lawyers, the bailiff, the clerk, the few family members who had shown up to watch, sat in the aftermath of something none of them knew how to name. The judge looked at me. His expression had changed. The skepticism was gone. In its place was something heavier. Respect, maybe. Or exhaustion at what he'd just witnessed. Miss Clark, he said, the court finds in your favor. The will is valid. The estate is yours. He signed something. Stamped something. I wasn't watching his hands. I was watching the empty doorway where my mother had been. That was 7 months ago. I think about that day more than I should. My therapist says I replay it because I'm still waiting for my mother to feel something, remorse, guilt, even embarrassment. But she never has. She told everyone who would listen that I forged the video. That I paid off the witnesses. That I manipulated a dying man. Some people believed her. Most didn't. But the ones who did were the same people who had always laughed at her jokes about the waitress. I lost nothing when they stopped calling. I sold the logistics company. My grandfather had kept it running with a management team, but I didn't want to run a trucking empire. I wanted to finish my degree. I wanted to sleep through the night without dreaming about courtrooms. I moved to a small town 2 hours north. Bought a house with a garden, just like my grandfather's. Adopted a golden retriever I named Arthur. And I went back to school. Not because I needed the degree. Because I had promised myself, sitting in that bank lobby with the safety deposit box key in my hand, that I would finish what I started. Last week, I graduated. Summa cum laude. My mother wasn't there. Neither was my sister. But my father came, the security guard who called me at 2 a.m. He sat in the 4th row and clapped so loud that people turned around. After the ceremony, he hugged me and said, "Your grandfather would have cried." I think he was right. I don't talk to my mother anymore. She sent me a letter last month. 3 pages of small handwriting, loops and curls, the same elegant script she used for thank you notes and sympathy cards. She said she forgave me. She said she hoped I would find it in my heart to welcome her back into my life. She said family was family and blood was thicker than water. I read the letter twice. Then I burned it in the fireplace. Not out of anger, out of acceptance. Because I finally understood something my grandfather tried to teach me when I was 9 years old. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you never learn how. Sometimes they choose cruelty because it's easier than looking at themselves. And sometimes, most times, the only way to win is to stop playing their game. I have my grandfather's watch on my wrist as I write this. An old Timex with a scratched face. It cost maybe $50. My mother wanted $11 million. But the thing she doesn't understand, the thing she will never understand, is that I would have traded every penny for one real conversation with her. One honest moment where she looked at me and saw a daughter instead of an obstacle. That was never going to happen. So I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. I stopped being the waitress waiting for someone else to decide my worth. And in the quiet of my garden, with Arthur the dog asleep at my feet and my grandfather's roses blooming in the afternoon light, I finally understood what he meant all those years ago. You're not just anything. You're the person who survived. And that is everything.